what Khan Academy is today could best be described as a tool or a resource. It's right now, if you go to the site, we have videos, we have interactive exercises, we have dashboards for teachers. And so depending, it could be used as a teacher to help their students. It could be used by a homeschooler who wants to learn something independently. It could be used for an adult who wants to review things that might be relevant to whatever they're exploring at the moment. But one thing I'd like to be clear is we don't view this as the end all of what we think this could be, and even how students should experience learning. We think that this is really just version 1, and it's a very primitive version right now, of a tool that will eventually empower a true interactive vision of education. And the other thing I want to make very clear is we don't see it as an either-or proposition. We don't see it as a virtual versus physical, a Amazon.com versus Barnes & Noble. We see it as a virtual and physical, or even better, how do we use the tools and resources of the virtual? How do we use those to actually empower the physical, to make the physical the best possible experience? And in this vision of what the total education experience can be, we have a couple of core philosophies. The first is the idea of mastery learning. Mastery learning, and I'll write it in quotes because mastery can mean different things to different people. To us, this is the general idea that students should have deep conceptual understanding of core ideas, of more fundamental ideas, before they are pushed ahead to the more derivative ideas or the more advanced ideas. And so if you think of a traditional progression in mathematics, although we think of this applies beyond just mathematics, traditional progression in mathematics, you start off with arithmetic, and then you go to algebra, and then you go through trigonometry and geometry and all the rest, but you eventually end up in calculus. And what we believe is happening for too many students, and this is why so many students end up having trouble with algebra and definitely calculus, is they are not getting mastery of the more fundamental ideas. We believe as students have the time to really build a strong foundation in arithmetic, including exponents and whatever else, then by the time algebra comes around, they will have a better intuition there, or they have a better chance of understanding it. And if students have a conceptual, deep understanding of algebra, then calculus is going to make a lot more sense. If you do it the other way around, if you just push students through so that they get through with 80%, 90% understanding, then what they essentially end up doing, just to survive, is start doing a superficial level of understanding. They start kind of pattern matching their way through algebra or calculus. And not only does that harm you later on as you keep building on it, it also makes it almost impossible to use these things in your everyday life. In our minds, it's much more valuable to have a deep understanding of algebra and being able to see the world in an algebraic way than just getting through algebra and kind of understanding calculus, but being able to apply or really fundamentally understand neither. The other idea, and this kind of gels with mastery-based learning, you kind of can't have mastery-based learning, at least in our minds, without a kind of self-paced reality. Because if we really want students to master things, we really have to give them the time and the space to master those concepts. If everyone else has mastered it and they're ready to move on, there's no reason why we have to move them on. We should let them work at their own pace. The other big thing about self-paced learning is that it creates student ownership. And this is a huge thing. This is a huge thing. Probably the most important thing that you can learn while you are learning in school isn't necessarily any one of these subject areas, figuring out how to solve a system of equations or take an integral. The most important thing to learn is how to learn. How do you take ownership of something? How do you, to some degree, how do you become your own guide? How do you set your own goals? And this can only happen in a self-paced environment where with mentorship, with people who can guide you, you can say, look, this is what I want to learn. This is how I want to go about learning it. And this is what I'm going to do to get there. And my goal is mastery. My goal isn't just to get by. The other thing we believe strongly in, and we've been working with many schools. We've been working with many schools across all of this, including just how we define our tools and our resources, is the idea of students teaching students, or we could call it maybe peer-to-peer teaching and learning. And there's an obvious benefit there of if you have other students around, maybe some who have gotten a little bit further ahead, who can tutor you, you have more access to people who might be able to help you. But we think it's at least as powerful for the student getting tutored as it is for the student doing the tutoring. Because it's one thing to do a lot of problem sets and to kind of go through subjects in the traditional way, but to truly get mastery of something, and I think most teachers would agree with this, you really have to teach it. You really have to be able to distill it and explain it and help mentor other people to it. And on top of that, you'll build other soft skills which are at least as important, like ownership, as these other kind of tangible skills. The skills of empathy, the skills of being able to listen to someone, the skills of kind of being able to guide someone without making them feel intimidated or insecure. And then finally, the fourth guiding principle for us is the idea that students, and this is very core to the physical experience, that when students are together, they should be interacting, so it should be interactive. And when we talk about interactive, we're not talking about computer interactive. We're talking about physical interactive. They should interact with other human beings. They should talk to them. They should smile. They should see them. And it should be inquiry-based or exploration-based. Inquiry, exploration. And this is super key to everything we believe, and this is why we are actively experimenting with summer camps that are driven all around this part of the experience, is because we believe that in order for a student to truly internalize all of these things, and it all goes together with especially the idea of mastery, they need to struggle with the ideas. They need to experience them tangibly. And, for example, we have students, they do things that are implicitly probability, but they don't know. They think they're just doing a simulation. They think that they're just playing some type of a game. But by doing those simulations and those games, later on when they are exposed to kind of the more formal academic ideas around probability or expected value, they now have a tangible understanding for them. They now have an intuitive understanding for them. And they also see the value in the more formal representation of it. So hopefully this gives a big picture of what we are about. We are a tool and a resource today, but the whole goal is to keep it, and we want people to use it in any way that they see fit. It could be part of a formal program, it could be a supplement, it could be used as a review of somehow, but our real goal is how can we optimize this tool? How can we improve this tool so that we can really drive these values to make a truly holistic education experience?